Ever wondered how World War III would play out if it was a board game? Picture this: nations as players, strategies unfolding on a global scale, alliances shifting like sand dunes, and at the end of it all, there's either checkmate or a draw. A bit like Risk, but with a lot more at stake. Let's take a step back for a moment. War, as grim as it is, has been a part of human history for centuries. From the ancient times of swords and shields to today's era of drones and cyber warfare, the face of conflict has evolved dramatically. However, the underlying principles, power, territory, resources, remain the same. It's like the rules of our hypothetical board game, they don't change, but how you play the game does. Now let's sprinkle in some fun facts. Did you know that the shortest war in history lasted less than an hour? It was between Britain and Zanzibar in 1896, and it clocked in at a staggering 38 to 45 minutes. Imagine that. A war shorter than most of our lunch breaks. Or how about the fact that Switzerland, famous for its neutrality, hasn't participated in any foreign war since 1815? That's over 200 years of sitting out on the sidelines, watching the game unfold. Talk about playing it safe. But here's the kicker. If World War III were a board game, it wouldn't just be about who has the biggest army or the most resources. It would also be about who can outwit, outplay, and outlast. It would be about forging alliances, understanding your opponent's strategies, and making the right moves at the right time. So, if World War III is a board game, who do you think would have the best strategy? Would it be the nation with the most military might, the one with the cleverest tactics, or perhaps the one who simply knows when to hold 'em and when to fold 'em? Only time, or perhaps our next game night, will tell. Did you know that some wars have been won without a single shot fired? Quite a fascinating concept, isn't it? Imagine a battlefield where the mightiest weapon is a well-crafted strategy, not a missile or a tank. Take, for instance, the peaceful surrender of the Belgian army in World War II. It was May 28, 1940, when King Leopold III, without the consent of his government, decided to surrender to the German forces. A controversial move that caused quite a stir. Still, it was an effort to save his people from the horrors of war. A king choosing his subjects over sovereignty? A rare sight indeed. Now let's turn the pages of history back even further, to the time of the ancient Greeks and the infamous Trojan horse. Ah, the Trojan horse, a symbol of strategic deception, and no, it was not a real horse. Sorry to shatter any illusions. It was in fact a huge wooden structure filled with Greek warriors. The Trojans, blinded by their victory over the Greeks, pulled this gift into their fortified city. Little did they know it was a trap, leading to their downfall. Speaking of traps, did you know that the Mongols used a similar strategy called the feigned retreat? They would pretend to flee, causing their enemies to break ranks and pursue them, only to find themselves surrounded and outflanked by the Mongol army. Quite the plot twist, isn't it? So, you see, wars have not always been about who has the bigger army or the mightier weapons. Sometimes it's about who has the sharper mind, the more innovative strategy. It's about the art of war, where the canvas is the battlefield and the brushstrokes are the tactics used. From the peaceful surrender of the Belgian army to the cunning Trojan horse, from the strategic Mongol retreat to the numerous other instances in history, it's clear that the art of war is a game of minds over might. Just goes to show it's not always about who has the biggest gun. What if World War III was more about cyber warfare than actual warfare? Now, there's a thought to chew on. Wars have always been an unfortunate part of human history, from the time of stone axes to the era of nuclear bombs. But what if I told you that the next big war might not involve any physical artillery at all? Yes, you heard it right. Welcome to the age of cyber warfare. In the digital era, where every aspect of our lives is intricately woven into the World Wide Web, it's no wonder that warfare has evolved too. But hey, don't take my word for it. Let's look at some fun facts. The first recorded cyber attack occurred in 1988. A worm, not the creepy crawly kind, but a computer worm named the Morris worm, was released into the internet. This little bugger slowed down the entire internet by 10%. Now imagine that on a larger scale. Scary, isn't it? Fast forward a few decades, and we have a new kind of soldier, armed not with guns and grenades, but with keyboards and coding skills. These cyber warriors can cripple an entire nation's infrastructure without ever setting foot on its soil. They can steal sensitive information, disrupt essential services, and even manipulate public opinion. Now, this doesn't mean that traditional warfare is obsolete. Far from it. but the battlefield has expanded and the rules of engagement have changed. So what's the takeaway from all this? Well, it's simple. In this new battlefield, everyone is a potential target. Your computer, your smartphone, even your smart fridge could be a part of this war. But fear not, because there's a way to protect yourself. Update your software regularly, use strong passwords, and be wary of suspicious links. It might seem like a small thing to do, but these are the shields and swords of the digital age. So remember to update your antivirus software. It might just save the world one day. Ever wondered who would sit on the metaphorical Iron Throne if World War III happened? In our modern-day Game of Thrones, the contenders are the global powers, each with their unique strengths and strategies. It's like a chess game on steroids, only instead of knights and bishops, we're dealing with nuclear submarines and stealth bombers. Let's start with the United States, the self-proclaimed king in the north, and their military might. The US has the most powerful military in the world, with technology and firepower that are second to none. But remember, in the Game of Thrones, even the mightiest can fall. Swooping in from the east is China, the dragon of the global stage, boasting the largest military force in the world. Yes, you heard that right. China has a staggering 2 million active personnel. That's like if every single person in Houston, Texas decided to join the army. But size isn't everything. As North Korea, the Kraken of our story, can attest. North Korea may not have the largest army, but they do have the most submarines. And we're not talking about the sandwich kind. These underwater predators can sneak up undetected, making North Korea a wild card in our hypothetical war. Then there's Russia, the dire wolf, known for its vast landmass and icy winters. Russia's military strategy is a mix of traditional brute force and cyber warfare. And let's not forget their nuclear arsenal. If the Game of Thrones were a poker game, Russia's holding a royal flush. And let's not forget about the EU, the lion of our tale. While not as militarily dominant as some of the other players, the EU has a knack for diplomacy and economic sanctions. They may not have dragons, but they've got some pretty powerful allies. So who would you bet on for the throne? No dragons allowed. So how do we avoid playing this deadly game of chess? Now that's the million-dollar question. While we've been having a good laugh imagining World War III as a global game of chess, the reality is far less amusing. We'd all rather avoid a real-life game that involves nuclear arsenals, don't you think? Now let's shift our gaze from the imaginary chessboard to the real world. We've got this wonderful thing called diplomacy. Sure, it might seem like a lot of handshaking, fancy dinners, and endless meetings, but it's actually one of the most powerful tools we have to prevent global conflicts. Diplomacy is all about negotiation, compromise, and understanding the needs and wants of others. It's like playing chess, but instead of trying to checkmate your opponent, you're trying to find a way to coexist peacefully on the same board. And speaking of peace, let's not forget about the United Nations. Here's a fun fact for you. The United Nations was founded in 1945 to prevent another global conflict after World War II. With its peacekeeping efforts and international courts, the UN is like a global referee, stepping in when things get a little too heated and making sure everyone plays by the rules. But of course, maintaining peace isn't just the job of diplomats and the United Nations. It's up to all of us. It's about understanding that despite our differences, we're all part of the same human family. It's about recognizing that our actions have consequences and that we have a responsibility to each other and to future generations. So the next time you think about World War III, don't imagine a deadly game of chess. Instead, picture a world where we've managed to checkmate the very idea of war itself, where diplomacy and understanding have triumphed over conflict and aggression. And that, folks, is how we try to keep World War III as just an idea for a board game. Imagine that, a world where the only wars we wage are on game boards. Now, isn't that a game we'd all like to play?